Winter playoffs are right around the corner for some teams, while one team has already started their playoff run with a successful series win.
We have tonight a series of experts in a roundtable format analyzing the upcoming playoff matchups for both the men's and women's basketball team and the ice hockey teams.
That is all coming up next here on Bobcat Breakdown.
Welcome everyone to the special playoff edition of Bobcat Breakdown. Tonight we will break down the upcoming and current playoff situations for the winter teams using our panel of QBSN and Q30 Sports experts. First, we will take a look at both the men's and women's ice hockey teams and their current playoff situations. The women this past weekend swept the St. Lawrence Saints in the best-of-3 series here in Hamden by winning Game 1 by the score of 5-0. They then continued their winning ways the next day by clinching the series with a 2-1 win. I now bring in our panel of hockey experts as they are Nick Dench, Mark Spillane, and Marty Joseph. Gentlemen, the Bobcats certainly started the playoffs on the right note. What do you guys have to say from this past weekend? Nick, we'll start with you.
They had a great weekend, They played really well. They played strong on all three zones. Chelsea Layden was phenomenal, as she has been all year. At times, she's been shaky, but for the most part, she's been strong as you can ask her to be, especially with Vigilante leaving. And that was huge for them. She made 53 saves and 54 shot attempts, and that one she just guessed wrong late in the game. It was very reminiscent of Game 2 last year. But, I mean, as you can say, guys, Layden was huge for this team this weekend.
They looked pretty good on Friday. I have to agree with you there, the 5-0 victory. And then they got a couple lucky bounces on Saturday. They missed out on a 5-minute power play opportunity. They didn't cash in on that. They almost had the game tied on them late. They almost gave up that lead. So it was a little bit dicey on Saturday, but Friday they certainly looked good. And they look poised to give Clarkson a run this weekend.
Yeah, I think impressive is a good word to sum up. I mean, I know when we were talking about it last week, we really thought this was going to be at least a 3-game series. And we didn't know how long these games were going to be. I mean, we saw a triple overtime game last year, so we really didn't know what to expect too much. We weren't even really very confident in whether or not they could get that win, but I think overall you'd be happy. I mean, you got a little bit of secondary scoring. It wasn't just that top line. You got some goals from Emma Woods. Obviously, Cheyenne D'Arcangelo, 3 more goals in the weekend, too. That's huge. They're going to need that top line to be clicking when they go up to Clarkson.
Yeah, and then you look at the top line also. Kelly Babstock was huge, and she was taking the right shots. Even if it wasn't the okay, I'm going to try to shoot and score, it's going to be, okay, I'm taking a shot with a purpose. That first goal was a perfect shot to set up D'Arcangelo. She really didn't have a great shot, so she's put it low blocker side like they said they were going to last week on the show. And they put it up, and D'Arcangelo was right there to finish. And then D'Arcangelo said in her interview, if she didn't finish, Colin was right behind her to finish it off.
And I think the biggest thing is that Chelsea Layden only gave up 1 goal. She needs to have as much confidence as possible heading up to Clarkson. If she had an iffy weekend and she wasn't feeling too confident heading up, this could be a big question mark. But she's only given up 1 goal in 2 games. She's going to be feeling a lot of confidence heading up to Clarkson, a team I think that's really motivated to knock off the Golden Knights.
Now, with all that being said, the Bobcats move on to the semifinals to face the #1 seed Clarkson Golden Knights. How would you guys break down that upcoming series? We'll start over there with you, Marty.
Well, I mean, I said at the beginning there, I think Clarkson is the team to beat in this ECAC. But they didn't have too much success last weekend either. They narrowly got by a #8 Union team, only scoring 4 goals in the 2 games. I'm sure they only gave up 1 goal, but they didn't get too many chances, and they didn't capitalize on too many chances. So that's probably best case scenario for this team too, heading in for the Bobcats. A team that might be struggling offensively a little bit. Sure, they did heavily outshoot Union in both of those games, but I mean, they were both very close games. So whether you give the credit to Union, but I mean, there still could be some question marks offensively for that Golden Knights team as well.
I mean, I'm with you in the fact that they're the team to beat. I think they're the Goliath of the conference. Cornell's good, Harvard's good, Quinnipiac's good, and then Clarkson's on that extra level. They have 3 of the top 6 scorers in the conference. The depth of scoring is there. They got one of the best offenses in the nation, right behind Minnesota. Same with the defense. Erica Howe might be the best goaltender in the entire country. They really are a powerhouse, and it's going to probably take a perfect game for the Bobcats to come out on top of that one.
Yeah, but they've proved they can play with Clarkson, and that's definitely helped, especially up in Shield. And when they went up there, they went down early, and they fought back. And that's what you like to see out of this team, a little bit of resiliency. And especially with a younger team against a team who has Erica Howe, as you mentioned, Jamie Lee Rattray, Carly Mercer, and Erin Ambrose. Those 4 are just insanely good players. Rattray's second in the nation in points. Mm-hmm. Howe, as you said, probably the best goalie in the country, just over a 1 goal against average this year. So, I mean, it's going to be a very difficult task, but the Bobcats are going in on a high note. They beat Cornell at Cornell. That's always a confidence boost as well, and Layden's probably playing her best hockey in quite some time.
and you look at it, Clarkson, they top 5 in offense, top 5 in defense, top 5 penalty kill, top 10 power play. So I mean, all the things there.
The list goes on and on.
But if you look at the way that the two teams played their past weekends, the matchup is sort of in the Bobcats' favor because this is going to be a low-scoring game. It's going to be a 2-1, 1-0 game, and the way that Chelsea Layden played against a better team, comparing St. Lawrence to Union, a better team, to only Erica Howe only saw 15 shots and 13 shots in those 2 games. So if the Bobcats can get an early goal and get that offense going, they could play shutdown D, and they could ultimately win this game. A really low-scoring game is what I expect.
I'm going to interject a little bit here, guys. I think in the playoffs, it's so key for depth of scoring, and that's something we've talked about with this Bobcat team all year. On the Golden Knights side, they have 4 players with 40 or more points. That's just compared to 2 players on the Bobcat side with just over 40 points. And all that comes from that first line with Woods, Babstock, and Darkangelo. That line accounted for 5 of the 7 goals scored last weekend. So I think it's something like that that really comes down to a matchup, especially in the playoffs, between 2 good teams on the women's side.
I think something worth noting is that Clarkson hasn't lost since December 6th. So this is a team that knows how to win, but that could potentially play against them and in the Bobcats' favor. Like you said, Marty, Bobcats get up by a goal or 2. Next thing you know, Clarkson doesn't fall behind a lot, might not be able to come back.
And you just mentioned they have all the pressure on them because they haven't lost in so long. Really similar to the men's hockey team last year. We were saying we want this team to lose before the tournament because we don't want that much pressure on them. They're hosting the ECAC semifinals and potentially the finals. So I mean, if anything, the Bobcats have to feel loose about this game, knowing the pressure's not going to be on them compared to Clarkson.
All right, thanks very much, guys, for all that. Now we're going to move towards the men's ice hockey team. The men finished the season with a 12-6-4 record in the ECAC and locked up the 3 seed in the ECAC playoffs. With all that being said, would you guys say the men underachieved or overachieved this season? Mark, we'll start over there with you.
That's a funny question, and I actually think this is exactly what I expected. I think they didn't overachieve. I don't think they underachieved. I think they achieved exactly what I expected them to, and it's kind of weird to say that, but it's true. They lost 11 seniors last year. You think about it, they lost their captain, Zach Curry. They lost the defensive defenseman of the year, Zach Davies. They lost their leading point scorer, and Jeremy Langway. The list goes on and on with how many pieces that this team lost. You think about all the freshmen that they've been playing, a new goaltender. Obviously, Eric Hartzell was gone after last year's Hobie Baker season. So I don't think it's possible for them to underachieve by losing that many pieces when you consider the fact that they spent nearly the entire season in the top 10.
Yeah, I'm right with you. When I was looking at it and trying to figure out how to answer that, I couldn't say under and I couldn't say over. I was trying to figure out that word, and I think how they did it how I expected them is the perfect way to do it, because as you mentioned, they lost everybody. They lost so many key components from last year. But the players who needed to step up this year really have for the most part, and some players have overplayed what we thought they were going to do. Bryce Van Brabant has been huge for this team. He's really proven to be the guy right in front. And when you look at it, this team has really done what they were supposed to, especially with such a young defense.
I agree with both of you on that matter. I think if you take away that last stretch of 5 or 6 games, and it's not an excuse, but if you take away that last 5 or 6 games, then they definitely overachieved in my eyes. But I think the way that they kind of came back down to earth a little bit, struggled a little bit against teams they probably should have beat. But, I mean, that's going to come with the youth that they have. And so I think this is right where you expected them, a 3-4 seed. I think at the beginning of the year, we just wanted them to get a first-round bye. I think that was the biggest thing. I mean, you knew Union was going to have all that talent coming back. They have 11 kids that played on the Frozen Four team 2 years ago as sophomores. So, I mean, I think they're still the team to beat. Colgate, the surprise, but I think Cornell was still a little bit better. At the beginning of the year, looking at them on paper, I think Cornell could have been picked to finish a little bit higher than that. And obviously, Colgate a great year as well. But I mean, from this standpoint, I think that's the 3 seed, the 4 seed is a good spot for them.
I mean, you guys could also think, though, they have a lot of good scoring talent still on this team with Jordan Samuel Thomas and the Jones twins. And coming in, they had a highly touted freshman in Connor Clifton, and Sam Mandis came out of nowhere as well. So in that sense, I guess you could say they could underachieve just a little bit, but you guys are all making good points there with all saying that really they lost a lot of people, and especially Eric Hartzell, that's a big one. So in that sense, they did overachieve just a little bit. Now, guys, being the 3 seed in the tournament, like you mentioned, is always certainly an interesting spot. And that is especially true for the Bobcats because if all the higher seeds hold up their first round, that would set up a Yale-Quinnipiac matchup in the quarterfinals. With that being said, what would be the best and worst matchup for the Bobcats, according to you guys? Marty, we'll start this off with you.
Well, I think obviously the best would be Yale. I think that would be the best matchup. I think that's the one that everyone wants. I think that's the one that both team wants. So I think that obviously would be the best matchup. You know you'd get the best effort from both teams out of it. It would be a great all-around college hockey series. I think probably the most dangerous matchup would be the Brown Bears. I mean, they always seem to give them trouble. They would need a lot of help to come to Hamden, though. They would need 3 upsets in that first round, so it's pretty unlikely that happens. But I mean, I think just looking at those bottom 8 teams, I think you have to say that Brown gives them the most trouble, because over the last 4 years, that's the team that's given them the most trouble. It seems like they always play them in the playoffs, and when they do, it's always a really physical, hard-hitting series.
Yeah, I got to go with Dartmouth for the best matchup. Quinnipiac's outscored Dartmouth 11-2 this year. Yes, the Yale series is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I think as a fan, that's the one you want to see. But as a player, I'm sure the team wants Dartmouth. It's a much higher touted team for them to play. They scored 5 goals on Charles Grant, who's proven to be their starting goalie after Cav Morris really didn't perform this year. They have 4 players on the team who have scored at least 2 goals against Dartmouth this year. So I think matchup-wise, they want Dartmouth. It seems to be the best matchup for them to win. And it's a doable thing. A couple teams get upsets, Bobcats get Dartmouth. For the worst matchup, I'm going to agree with you. I think Mark will too. It's going to be Brown. Brown plays a much more physical game than most teams in the conference, and the size of Quinnipiac really doesn't match up with that outside of Bryce. And then you go in and, I mean, they know how to hit, and they can outplay the Bobcats and out-physical them.
All right, well, we are going to introduce a new segment for the Bobcat Breakdown, and that is the confidence meter. What I'm going to do is name an aspect for the men's and women's hockey teams, and you guys will tell me how confident you are in that aspect by giving me a 1 through 10 rating. We will start with the goaltenders, and Nick, you can begin this one.
For Michael Gartig, I'm going to go with a 7. He's shown that he can be very strong this year. He's shown good net presence, but he's shown that he can be inconsistent. He's given up 6 goals to MAAC. He's given up 6 goals to Union. So there are games where he should show up and he doesn't, and that worries me a little bit. But he has played strong against good teams as well. He's given up a goal to Union. He shut out Yale. It's been a very good season for him overall, but I don't think it's been to where he wanted it, and it definitely scares me a little bit. For Chelsea Layden, especially after last weekend, I'm going to give her an 8. She was phenomenal last weekend, and she's been phenomenal the last 2 weekends since she was benched against Brown. I think that was the big thing. They bench her. She now has 2 shutouts and has given up 2 goals to a Cornell team who's very good and a very good St. Lawrence team. So I think going forward, she has been a very good player for them, and she's earned a little bit more confidence for me.
Yeah, I'm going with a 7 for both of them. So I'm right in the same area that you are, Nick. And that's because, I mean, you mentioned they've both shown flashes of brilliance, and then they both had some lapses where you kind of say, well, what was that? What happened there? So, and I think that's to be expected. Both of them are first-year starting goaltenders. So I'm going to go with a 7 for both of them. They both went through a rough patch about a month ago, but they both seem to have come out of that and are playing brilliantly right now.
I'm going to go with an 8 for both of them, and I think that people have been quick to jump on Michael Gartig for some of the criticism that he's been getting this year, because I still don't necessarily think it's been his fault most of the time. There have been goals where, yeah, you say he has to have that, he has to make that save. But you look at the Colgate-Cornell series, and I think the Cornell game, he had some of the biggest saves he's had all year. Same with the Colgate game as well. But turnovers, mistakes, guys out front of the net picking up rebounds, easy lay-ins against Colgate. The goal for Cornell was an unacceptable turnover by Sam Annis at the blue line. So it's at the point where I think both goaltenders have stepped into roles where we didn't know what to expect from them this year, and I think they've both excelled expectations. You look at, for Chelsea Layden's case, she's stepping in the shoes, replacing probably one of the best women's goaltenders in program history, and she's been one of the most consistent players for that team all year long. So I think the confidence meter is an 8 for both of them, because I think they're probably the strongest part of each of their team's games.
All right, sticking with the confidence meter, we're going to make this one real quick, guys, this section. But what would you give the confidence meter for the defenses of both teams? Mark, start it up.
I'm going to go with a 5, and I think Marty just kind of hit on that. The inexperienced defense, more so for the men than the women. The women have done a really good job. Cindy Rusler and company, Kristen Tamberg, Taryn Baumgart, Kristen Tamberg, and Cindy Rusler don't play like sophomores. They play like upperclassmen. And then all the freshmen have done a fantastic job on the women's side. On the men's side, however, Devon Taves, Joe Fiala, and company have had some rough patches this year, and it's cost the Bobcats and certainly hasn't helped out Michael Gartig.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think probably in the 6 or 7 range, but I have a lot more confidence in the women's defensive core than I do in the men's core. Against teams that they're going to see in the tournament, whether it's the ECAC or the NCAA, Connor Clifton can't be running around the way he's been running around the last couple of weeks. Yeah. We said at the beginning of the year when he started doing it, he's skilled enough to get back, but there's going to be times where he's going to get caught up ice. He's been really undisciplined the last couple of weeks. The ejection in the game a few weeks ago It's at the point where they have to be mature enough facing these experienced teams like Union, like Cornell, possibly even Colgate down the road. That would present a matchup if all 4 teams that got byes were to meet in Lake Placid. So especially when it comes tournament time, the NCAAs, they're going to need to clean that up or else they're going to be one and done.
Yeah, I think for the men, I'm going to go with the lower one with a 6. They're inexperienced, especially without Danny Federico. We don't know if he's going to be back this weekend or next weekend. This extra week might help him, but Federico out, he was really the saving grace for Connor Clifton at times, and he was for Mike Dahlhusen last year. But when you look at it, Clifton can't be taking those stupid penalties, and he seems to do it too much, way too much, and he hasn't corrected it at all this year. For the women, I'm a little more optimistic. I think they can go with an 8. They have proven that they're progressing, and this weekend they look their best they have all year. Kristen Tamberg was flying up and down the ice. Sid Rusler has been phenomenal this year. And then you always have Shelby Wignall, who is their backbone. She knows what's going on back there. She's been doing it for 4 years against these teams. So you look at it, they're much more experienced, they're playing more experienced, and they're really showing that they're still progressing as the season goes on.
Yeah, certainly for the men, they are now playing five underclassmen in their top 6 defense now, with Federico not being able to play. And I think you hit the nail right at the head with the women, Nick. Certainly, Sydney Rusler always likes to jump up into the play and try to be a little more offensive. And she can do that. She has the talent for it. And Taryn Baumgart and Kristen Tamberg do a very good job for making up for that. And them alone are a very, very good core for the women's defense core. One last topic for the confidence meter, though, gentlemen, and that is scoring for both teams. Marty, take it away.
I'm gonna go the other way in this one. I think the men's team, I'm a little bit more confident in their offense than the women's team, because the women have pretty much shown that they have one line of consistent offense, and that's going to eventually cause trouble, whether they can find a way to get past Clarkson and maybe even win the ECAC and get a tournament bid. Eventually, if that's the way it's going to stay, they're going to hit a brick wall and not really be able to beat a team with just one line of consistent offense. You look at the men's side. We've seen when they get a quick goal, when they get it going, they can put 6 up any night of the weekend. So especially against a team that's going to be coming in, whether it's Yale, whoever else it might be, they're going to be sitting around waiting for a few weeks, getting healthy, waiting for that team to come in here next Friday night, and they're going to be pumped up. I think you could possibly see them have one of their big outbreaks like they did against Cornell last year in that first round.
They had an outbreak against Cornell. That when they scored 10.
Yeah, that was.
I don't know. I don't know if we'll
sure.
see that. I'm going to go with about a 6 for the women and a 7 for the men for the same reasons that you noted. And I think it all depends on Jordan Samuels-Thomas, how effective he can be. He played on Friday. They won by 8. He didn't play on Saturday. They tied Clarkson 1-1. So I don't know if there's a correlation there, but it seems like there is. And I think it all depends on if he's there. It just seems to have an extra little bit of spark when he's in the lineup. But I don't know if it's an 8-goal difference, but it certainly makes a difference, and we'll see how effective he can be as he returns from a past injury.
Yeah, I think for the women it's a 5, same thing. They really don't have anything outside of the first line, and they've shown it all year. For the men, they have 9 players outside of that top line of Jones, Annis, who have at least 10 points, and I think it's 8 of them are over 20 points. So this is a very strong secondary scoring team, and Pekka's finally stepping up. Bryce Van Braven's been a surprise. Travis St. Dennis has been good this year, and Jordan Samuels-Thomas, along with 2/3 of their defense, all scoring very well this year.
Yeah, easily. I understand where you guys are coming from the women's side. They don't really have that first line. That's what they've had all year, and that certainly has helped them to this point. But once you get into deeper playoffs runs, you're going to have that depth of scoring, like we said. And especially with the men, Jordan Samuels-Thomas is so key, because when Jordan Samuels-Thomas plays, he's on a line with Corey Hibbler, and Bryce Van Brabant, and that's a huge line. That's a very, very important key to have if you're facing like a Cornell or a Clarkson. And when he doesn't play on that line, they institute someone like a Tommy Shutt, and that's just a whole different mantra for that line. So certainly he's easily a very big important part for the offense for the men's team. Well, the biggest event in Women's Division I hockey is coming to Quinnipiac, and Taylor Massey tells us how it got here and what it means to the school.
From March 21st to the 23rd, Quinnipiac hosts the Frozen Four at High Point Solutions Arena at the TD Bank Sports Center.
I don't think there's a better venue for it in women's hockey. I mean, I think the seating capacity is perfect. I think our facilities are amazing in terms of hosting 4 teams comfortably with the University Club, the locker room set up. So I thought it was a natural, and so I was pretty excited when Jack did bring it up.
Since its opening in 2007, the TD Bank Sports Center had the potential to host a major sporting event.
And I knew from that day forward that this TD Bank Sports Center, the High Point Solutions Arena, would be a perfect site for the Women's Frozen Four. So having been familiar with the process, familiar with many people at the NCAA, we had a couple of years where all of the women's coaches and the men's coaches were raving about Quinnipiac and the High Point Solutions Arena at the TD Bank Sports Center, that we submitted a bid.
The bid was accepted almost unanimously, and Quinnipiac became the site for the 2014 Frozen Four. It was time to prepare for the biggest sporting event the school has ever hosted.
To see that Frozen Four big banner tape sticking on the glass wall outside, wow, this is big time. You know, it reminds you a little bit of a mini Olympic Village. You know, when you see Sochi and you see walk in, you say, wow, look at that big sign. This is the big time. So I think it's really been, everybody's been extremely exciting. We've got sort of the athletic staff, the TD Bank staff. We have the Quinnipiac University community. We have the Greater New Haven Sports Council are all sort of co-sponsoring and helping out with this, which will be a phenomenal event.
Well, ticket sales have been amazing, and I think that's the biggest component that the players are concerned about. You know, everyone wants a great experience, but what makes a great experience is a packed house with people who are pretty excited. And as I said from the beginning, I think Quinnipiac is one of the only places that could sell out if we're not in it, if the host team's not in it, because I just think it's a great central hockey area, and we're surrounded by, when you consider Division I and Division III hockey schools, there's tons within 2, 3, 4, 5 hours of here, like no other host before. So I think it gives a lot more people the opportunity to witness it firsthand.
Hosting the Frozen Four is just one more event to put Quinnipiac on the map.
Quinnipiac, in terms of academics, athletics, and everything, in terms of national recognition, has been growing and growing over the past few years. This will just catapult us in terms of, you know, the word's kind of out there, but for everyone to see what we have here on such a big stage, I think is really exciting for the program and the institution, and I think we'll be able to parlay it into even better recruiting and better recognition about what we have to offer here.
The Quinnipiac women's hockey team continues to fight for a spot in the Frozen Four, but the event has already succeeded in labeling Quinnipiac as a hockey school. Taylor Massey, Q30 Sports.
Thanks, Taylor. When we come back, Jordan Siegler and our panel of basketball experts bring to you the upcoming playoff series for both the men's and women's basketball team. Stay right here.
The men's and women's basketball teams wrapped up their regular seasons this weekend, completing their first regular seasons in the MAAC. Up next for both squads is the MAAC tournament in Springfield, Massachusetts. The men's and women's teams each earned a first-round bye, with the men seeded third and the women seeded fourth. The men's team will play the winner of the Marist-Niagara first-round matchup, while the women will play against the fifth-seeded Canisius Golden Griffins in the quarterfinals. The team finished fourth in the MAAC, coming off a 30-win season last year that included an undefeated conference record and an NCAA berth. I'm now joined by Q30 Sports basketball experts Jordan Katz, Morey Hershgordon, and Dylan Fearon to talk about the teams. So, gentlemen, let's start with the women's team. Did the women's basketball team overachieve or underachieve this season? Jordan, let's start with you.
Guys, I think it's simple. I think they underachieved. I think that's harsh to say, but they were preseason picked to finish third, and maybe that was a little too high. And now we can look at that and say, you know what, that was probably too much to expect out of them. But having said that, yes, they went 14-6. Yes, they were solid, Morey, but they didn't have the year offensively we thought they had. Their numbers were low. They had trouble replacing Felicia Barron. I think they underachieved.
Jordan, I do agree. I do think they underachieved. You look at the bottom 7 teams that finished below Quinnipiac, they were 14-0. The top 3 teams, they were 0-6. They had a great out-of-conference schedule that included road games at St. John's, at Louisville, and they didn't take advantage of things that they could have learned from those games and apply them to tougher teams, the 3 top teams in Marist, Iona, and Fairfield at the top of the MAAC.
Well, look at the 6 losses they had in conference, Morey. Fairfield, Iona, and Marist. The Fairfield games were all single digits. Iona, single digits. Marist, another single-digit loss. Very close games, competitive games. They're in the game.
And the Iona game at home, they could have easily won.
Right, and the Marist game they could have won as well.
They cut it to 1.
Right. So if I told you they went 14-6 in conference without telling you who they beat and who they lost, what would you say? I think they overachieved.
I get it, and I understand, and I think that argument's perfectly valid. But when you look at this team and you look at what they don't do well, the bottom line is this team used to be strong scoring the basketball. They used to be strong defensively, forcing turnovers and getting out in transition. They don't do that as well this year.
But they're in the MAAC. They were in the NC, now they're in the MAAC. They lost Felicia Barron.
I understand that, but that doesn't mean that they overachieved per se. They should have adjusted better. Is it? And maybe the number is about right. Maybe if you want to argue the number is about right, I don't think I can refute that. But to me, I do think they underachieved.
Maybe it is like the men's hockey team. Maybe it wasn't that they
That's a good
overachieved.
point.
Maybe it wasn't that they underachieved. Maybe it was just right about that 3 or 4 seed where we thought that they would fall.
14 conference wins and one of the toughest non-conference schedules in the country. 19 wins this season, 19-11. I think that's very good. I think they overachieved.
All right, guys, now let's talk about going forward for the women's team. Who do you think is going to be the key for them in the tournament, Jasmine Martin or Brittany McQuain?
I definitely think it has to be Brittany McQuain because assuming that they can defeat Canisius on Friday afternoon, they would then play Iona. Iona has great guards. They have great bigs. But Quinnipiac's strength are the guards. They only have a few big men that definitely can make an impact inside, and that has to be Brittany McQuain. She anchored them in that comeback from when they were down 16. They cut it to 1 at home last week. And I think that she's going to be the biggest impact for them to upset the Gales if they want to move on to the championship game.
But you just said it. Brittany McQuain was great, cutting it from 16 to 1. She's been there. You know what you're going to get from Brittany McQuain. You're going to get 14 points, 10 rebounds. Jasmine Martin, you don't know what you're going to get. She's been very inconsistent this season in the MAAC, especially in conference play. If she's doing well, if she's playing well, they're going to win. But if she's inconsistent, if she's not shooting the 3 well, if she's not shooting the ball well, they're going to come away with a W.
Inconsistency, you have players off the bench that can hit the 3, such as Ellen Cannon. Maria Napolitano can shoot the 3. Jasmine Martin was a second-team All-MAAC selection. Same with Brittany McQuain. There's no inconsistency there.
So being the senior, and I now get to decide which one of you is right and which one of you is wrong, I'm going to take one step this way. I understand that Brittany McQuain, you want her to go down low and dominate. The bottom line is what this team lacked with Felicia Barron not here. What they lacked is they lacked a scorer that could take the ball when things bogged down and go make a play. That was Jasmine Martin last year. For the most part of this year, that hasn't been Jasmine Martin. She showed glimpses of it in the home game against Iona. She was a big reason why they came back from down 16. If they're going to make a deep run, both players really have to be there. Let's call a spade a spade. They've got to be there. Jasmine Martin is probably the most important player to their success because when things bog down, she's the player that goes and gets a basket for them, not Brittany McQuain.
But I think that's what makes the Bobcats excellent, that they have different pieces, that it can be McQuain, that it can be Guastella, that it can be Napolitano, that it can be Martin, that one team can't come out of a timeout and say, okay, we got to look at player A or player B here. It could be a couple different players for the Bobcats, which makes it tough for other teams to game plan against the Bobcats.
But you look at losses for the Bobcats. Brittany McQuain still has a double-double. She has 12 and 9, 14 and 8. Jasmine Martin has 7 points, 8 points. In wins, she has 21, 17, even 26. It's got to be Jasmine Martin.
Jordan, I think Morey mentioned a key player, Maria Napolitano. She extends the game with her. She extends the defense with her 3-point shot. That opens up McQuain and Martin for this team to really compete.
For driving dump downs.
Right.
All right, guys, now we're going to have to shift our attention over to the men's basketball team. They've had a pretty good season, also finishing 3rd in their first year in the MAAC. Their success could be seen as fairly surprising, considering they were picked 7th in the MAAC coach's preseason poll. Now, the question I'm going to ask you guys is, how are they able to pull off such a season?
I'm really not that surprised, guys, okay? Very experienced team. They start 3 seniors and 2 juniors when healthy. They brought in Umar Shannon from St. Francis of PA. Without him, they would not be 3rd. Very key piece. Very experienced team. No other team in the MAAC can say they start 3 seniors and 2 juniors. I'm not really that surprised that they've finished 3rd.
I think it's funny that you mentioned the experience. That's not a phrase that we would have used with this team had it been last year. The reason why is the maturity level of Zaid Hurst and Usman Drame is night and day from last year to this year. Usman Drame has improved in every facet of this game, of his game. Defensively in the help, he takes away defenders. He can go help from block to block and block shots. He's at 2.5 a game, I believe, off the top of my head. Zaid Hurst has now proven to be a wing scorer and, again, balances out the court between him and Umar Shannon. Not having Umar Shannon is going to hurt this team. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the maturity level of this team, Morey, is the reason why they were able to go into the MAAC and make such a big impact in their first year.
Jordan, Dylan, I don't think it's the maturity. I think it's the big men. When you come into the MAAC, MAAC is a guard-dominated conference. The top scorers are guards. You come in and you see Usman Drame, Ike Azatam make integral impacts right off the bat during the season. They are top in rebounds, top in points, they have led the way for this Bobcats team. It hasn't been the maturity, it's been the big men dominance in the MAAC.
It's helped that they've had guys that can take the ball in the latter stages of the second half and go score, so the senior leadership is there. But Jordan, I mean, all things considered, this team was probably the biggest surprise, and it's going to be a shame if Tom Moore doesn't win Coach of the Year. The bottom line is, guys, it's going to be a shame if he doesn't, because he did a terrific job with this team.
Absolutely, Jordan. Now, let's talk about, you mentioned him earlier. Umar Shannon was such a huge addition to this team. He got hurt over the weekend against Siena, and he is probably done for the MAAC tournament, maybe done for the season. How is the team going to be able to have success without him?
I think they definitely will. James Ford Jr., Evan Conti, Shaq
We'll
Shannon.
tell you why you're wrong, by the way, but you can start.
Umar Shannon is a great three-point shooter, yes. He averages about 14 points a game, yes. But he doesn't have high assist numbers. He doesn't have high rebound numbers. Shaq Shannon is a hustle guy. Evan Conti's a hustle guy. James Ford Jr. brings length and thickness, and same as Justin Harris off the bench. Justin Harris can also hit the three. So you have these players that come off the bench where they can score, they can rebound, and they can hustle. And yes, Umar Shannon's loss will be affected when teams pressure the Bobcats in the full court, but you have other players that can come out and definitely increase their stats and help out where the loss to Umar comes from.
You're talking about, you said that they lost a great three-point shooter and that they have other guys off the bench. James Ford Jr. played 20 minutes against Marist, attempted 1-3 and missed. Obviously, Umar Shannon's not going to have high rebounding numbers.
His calling card is as a shooter, though, and his calling card is a scorer.
Right.
What Tom Moore's done a terrific job of is making him actually a stopper. James Ford Jr. is a key piece down the stretch for this team, no doubt about it. But offensively, he's now got to provide a scoring punch. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. To me, the biggest issue of why they lost Umar Shannon, the biggest impact that it has, when we come into a situation now with 2 minutes to go with this team, and this team has to find a guy that can just take the ball and go score, that's Umar Shannon. That's their guy. We were talking about it before the show. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Z? Is it going to be Ike? Where do you go with the basketball? Do you go to Oos? Because none of them are proven.
The women's, they have 3 or 4 great players in which a team can't come out of a timeout and say, okay, it's going to be 1, it's going to be 2. The men's have a lot of different. Yes, Ike might not have shown that early in his career, but he's a senior and he's due to make big plays.
You need someone, though. You need someone that when things bog down, and you need someone that's comfortable taking that big shot. For me, I haven't seen Ike Azatam comfortable in that role yet, Dylan. I know this is your guys' first year, and I've been here. I haven't seen him comfortable in that role yet. I'm not saying he can't be it, but right now, they don't have that big scoring piece.
I think Shaq Shannon's got to step up. Okay, he has 3-pointer in the last 6 games. He can shoot. He's been hot. It needs to be him stepping up, not James Ford. Z's got to show up. When he gets 20 points or more, they never lose almost.
They're lethal.
Right. So it's really got to be Shaq and Z stepping up.
All right, thanks, guys. Now, the biggest story for the men's basketball team going forward is going to be how far can they go. However, the rest of the season will also be the swan song for senior forward Ike Azatam. Azatam is one of the best players to ever wear the Bobcat uniform, recording over 1,000 points and rebounds in his career. He's also currently closing in on the Quinnipiac all-time Division I rebound record, currently held by Justin Ruddy. Ike has certainly had quite the career at Quinnipiac, and our own Andrew Badillo caught up with Ike to reflect upon his career.
Ike Azatam's career at Quinnipiac has been a great one, but as Coach Tom Moore describes it, Azatam was 1 vote away from not being a Bobcat. Luckily, that vote was Coach Moore's to make.
We had a really tough decision on him and another power forward that we were going back and forth on in that fall. And the staff was pretty much split on going with Ike or going with this other kid. And luckily I had the deciding vote. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, but we went with Ike, and it's been a great decision for Quinnipiac basketball, and I think for Ike.
It was certainly the right decision for both Coach Moore and Azatam, as both would go on to have a great relationship at Quinnipiac. Azatam has grown under the guidance of Moore, especially on the glass.
I was a pretty good rebounder coming into the school, but Coach Moore's been able to help that. He preaches it so much. He has the rebounding boards all over the locker room. If you miss a box out in practice, you'll get subbed out. So he's really affected the way I rebounded.
Azatam's rise to the MAAC Elite this season can attest to his maturity and improvements in practice.
He's practiced more consistently. That's the biggest thing, is every single day He's more of a hungry offensive player every day. He's looking to dominate practice more than he ever did.
I take defense a lot more serious. I take hustling down for loose balls, taking charges. It just happens to grow with maturity where I'm a senior-laden, junior-laden team.
Azatam is one of the many upperclassmen on this Bobcats team. When asked how he has improved as a leader, Azatam reflected back to his earlier days at Quinnipiac, watching players such as Justin Ruddy, James Johnson, and Kevin Tarka.
Yeah, I think I became a better leader just taking little things from those guys. I feel like I improved a lot from my freshman year now, from freshman, sophomore year to junior year to my senior season.
When Bobcats guard Zaid Hurst was asked to characterize Azatam's game, the word that came to mind was
toughness. You know, Ike is he's a man-child, you know. He dominates on and off the court, you know, so him, his rebounding, his scoring, you know, is definitely, it's definitely a toughness factor that spreads amongst the team.
From the TD Bank Sports Center, I'm Andrew Badillo, Q30 Sports.
All right, thanks, Andrew. And I'm now here with, well, some of you may know him as a professor here at QU, but he's also the chairman of the Athletic Council, Rich Hanley. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Let's start with the MAAC tournament in general. This is a step up in competition for QU athletics. What does the MAAC mean to you?
Participation in the MAAC gives us really a firm footprint in the New York market. The NEC, bless its heart, is a good league, but you're playing now on Broadway in terms of the MAAC with Manhattan, Iona, New York schools, New York area schools, and so this really centers us in the metropolitan area where we belong. So alumni from our university who work in New York can really follow our action. I know the tournament's in Springfield, Mass. and whatnot, so it's a little bit of a ride. But nevertheless, the consciousness in New York is on the MAAC because of the long-standing traditions of the schools in that fine league.
We've dealt a lot about QU basketball on this show, but let's face it, the MAAC as a whole is a very tough conference. Speaking specifically from the men's side of the portion right now, is there a team that QU fans need to look out for and say, listen, other than the big teams of Iona, Canisius, and Manhattan, this is a team that can make a deep run in this tournament?
I can tell you it's not going to be Ryder. I mean, it is a tale of haves and have-nots in the MAAC and the men's league. Half the teams are really, really good. The rest just have, severe weaknesses. No size, no depth, no speed. It's just there's an imbalance right now in the league. But if there's a team outside of the Bobcats or someone in the lower tier to look out for, it's really hard to tell. I mean, St. Peter's. I mean,
no Siena.
Siena. The Saints are solid. I mean, they represent well, but there's still no oomph there.
But it's top heavy this year.
It's top heavy, and you look at the top with Manhattan and Iona, particularly those two teams. They've been playing basketball since 1946. They've been recruiting the New York area since that time. They're really embedded in the culture of New York, so they can recruit some really, really good players. Not, obviously top conference players, but mid-major, they can recruit good, solid, sturdy basketball players. And so I look for Manhattan and Iona to be the class of the league this year as they finish in the regular season, but also the tournament, though Quinnipiac can represent. Quinnipiac's a dangerous team. We'll see how they respond to the injury to Umar Shannon.
No, I was just about to ask you.
This is good. This is a good test of strength.
Yeah.
Character is part of the tournament play. You got to rebound, you got to play defense. Those are the first two things, and those two things require great character. And Quinnipiac has shown great character. Now let's see if they can do it without their leader on the court, Umar Shannon. And it's going to take great character to stay close to some of these teams, and it's going to take great character to overcome this catastrophic loss. But I think they can do it because tournament play, as you know, postseason play is all about rebounding and defense. And Quinnipiac certainly can bring both those attributes.
Okay, so of the two Quinnipiac teams, I got to ask you, which one's got a better chance of representing the MAAC in the NCAAs?
Men's basketball team. I just think their rebounding and defense is superior and can lead them past this injury. On the women's side, gosh, you're going against a very tough Marist team. It's the team of the century. It just always. And the last regular season game, Marist is going to Iona. Regular season, Marist wins. They hold on to the championship. Regular season, a share of the championship, and they won that game. That's a big character thing. To win that game because you're clinging to the championship. Marist refused to let it go. And that tells me there's a deep, deep-seated will on that club. And it'd be very tough for McQuaid, Jasmine et al. To do something against a team that has that core will to win and this great tradition up at Marist.
Professor, thank you so much
Thanks
for
for
your
having
time. Appreciate it. When we come back on Bobcat Breakdown, the upperclassmen are going to give you our predictions and thoughts for all 4 teams as they enter the real strength of postseason play. So stick it here on Bobcat Breakdown.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bobcat Breakdown. That's going to do it for our playoff preview portion of the show.
Yeah, but now we're going to send it over to our upperclassmen roundtable, see what they have to say about the upcoming playoffs of both men's and women's hockey and basketball team. Guys, what do you got for us?
Oh, I get to play analyst and host here. This is fun. I'm going to enjoy this. So
Whose idea was this?
We
let's
did come up with the idea for the show.
Well, you know,
You guys are
I get a little
upperclassmen
bit.
now.
I get a little bit. That's true. Let's start with your team in any sport: men's basketball, women's basketball, men's hockey, women's hockey. Doesn't matter. Or not for any of the questions. Doesn't matter. Which team in any of the conferences is most likely to surprise in their playoff tournament? Let's start with Nick.
I'm going to go with the St. Lawrence men's hockey team.
Okay.
They're a little underlooked because their defense really isn't that great. It's not a very strong defense, but we did see that when Matt Wenninger's on, he can steal a game. But you look at the Carey brothers. Greg Carey, second in the nation in points, first in the nation in assists, and last year he was a very highly touted goal scorer. His brother has taken over that role. And, I mean, this is such a strong offensive team, best power play in the country. So you look at it, this is a very strong team. It can be a very scary team if their offense gets rolling. And if you get Matt Wenninger, who's going to be hot a couple games in a row, they could make Lake Placid make some noise.
I'm going to stick in the ECAC men's side, and I'm going to go with Brown. I mean, I say it every year, I know, but I think that's a team that could surprise. Look at them last year. They looked like they were just going to tail off at the end of the year, and they end up going all the way to the ECAC championship game. So I'm gonna go with them. They have a matchup with St. Lawrence, like you just mentioned, in that first round, but that can go anyway. I think that can go. That's probably going to be a 3-game series, and then who knows? They may come to Hamden. They may go somewhere else. But I mean, they play that scrappy, low-scoring kind of hockey that wins games in playoffs, and I think they have the experience. Matt Laredo, I think, has been really good for them this year. I think they bring the experience. I'm sure they're a little bit more of a younger team compared to some of the other upper teams in the ECAC, but you just look at the last 4 years. They've been a team that's been around in the conversation at the end of the year in the ECAC.
I was splitting hairs between both of those teams, but to go a different direction, how about RPI in the ECAC? And here's why. Because if they get through that first round series, which they should because they're going to be favored in that series, their next matchup could be against Colgate, a team that they're 4-1-1 against the last 3 years. They match up well with the Raiders. It just seems to be a problem for the Raiders to beat them. So they get through that first round. Next thing you know, they pull an upset, and then they're in Lake Placid with the top 4.
And you got to remember, RPI was picked by the coaches for the #1 seed overall at the beginning of the season. The only reason they tailed off a little bit because they lost Jason Kasdorf. They still have a lot of talent.
I would pick one of the basketball teams, but I don't think the MAAC is a particularly deep conference like it was last year. On the men's side, 4 played 6 last year in the championship. I don't see that happening this year on the men's side or the women's side. So going in the hockey direction, I'm actually going to go a little different than you guys. I'm going to go to the women's side. I actually think that the Quinnipiac women's ice hockey team could surprise people because they played these 3 teams incredibly tough in the regular season. I don't think one of these teams scared them. We've talked about it a number of times. I think the thing that posed the most problem, that's the phrase I'm looking for, posed the most problem for the Bobcats was the first round matchup against St. Lawrence. I think mentally that was their biggest roadblock. I don't know if they're really mentally afraid of any of the top 3 teams that are there that they could play. So I think they have a good chance to surprise. Let's go to the second topic, and the second topic, of course, is the team most likely to flop, and we'll start with Bills.
I think this one is so obvious on the men's hockey side with Clarkson. I think they're going to beat Princeton. They've already beaten Princeton twice this year, and Princeton has frankly been terrible the entire season with the exception of a couple of games, including the one against Quinnipiac, as many people remember. But Clarkson is a team that has 6 wins since Christmas, 2 of which came against Princeton.
That's not good.
And Yale is the only team in the conference with a winning record that they've beaten in that time. They haven't beaten anybody else that's good. They haven't beaten Union, Quinnipiac, Cornell, Colgate, any of those teams. So once they beat Princeton like I expect, I think that's it for them. I think they're going to be one and done.
Yeah, I like that too, but the only thing that goes against that is that they were picked to finish last at the beginning of the season. So they might have just been recipients of a weaker schedule at the beginning of the season, playing some good hockey at the right time. But like you said, ever since that Christmas break, they've been awful.
Yeah.
And I think that if they're not one of the teams that are going to flop, I think another team that you can look at is Colgate. I mean, sure, they did have a great regular season, but they're still a team that's really young, not necessarily built for the playoffs like Union, like Cornell, like Quinnipiac, even like Yale. Sorry.
That's all right.
But, I mean, you look at a team like that, sure, they probably are the surprise in the ECAC, if not the entire nation this season in terms of they're probably an at-large team right now, even if they don't win. But I think there's going to be a time where they're going to run into a roadblock, whether it's in the second round series. Maybe they get over the hump and get to Lake Placid, but I think there's going to be a time where they're not necessarily going to show that they're a number 2 seed in the ECAC.
No, Marty, I agree entirely with you. I don't think Colgate is going to do anything. I think they might even lose in that first round, whoever they draw. As the 2 seed, that would be a flop because of the way they've played.
RPI, I'm telling you.
RPI can do it. But you look at Colgate, they have nobody who can score consistently. They really don't have that great of a defense. Where did they come from? They were supposed to be towards the bottom of the conference. They might be the exact opposite of Clarkson, their performance, how Clarkson overachieved. I think Colgate also overachieved, and I think their youth, their inexperience, I think that hurts them in the ECAC tournament. That might actually bump them out of an at-large bid.
Clarkson's a team who started out strong and finished weak.
It's the complete opposite.
Started out a little weak.
Colgate's given up 7 goals to Quinnipiac. They gave up 8 goals to Mercyhurst. So it's really not a very good Colgate team.
And you look at the conference as a whole. I mean, you got Yale, and then you got Quinnipiac, Cornell, and Union. Other than that, it's kind of a mediocre to lower end conference. The bottom 4 teams, let's face it, are maybe with the exception of St. Lawrence, they're 3 pretty bad teams in Harvard, Princeton, and Dartmouth. So, I mean, they are young, but they're bad. So.
Listen, being hockey guys, it's okay that you guys didn't get the right answer this time. It's all right.
There's always a right answer.
There's always a right answer. Generally speaking, it's mine.
It's always yours.
I think the team most likely to flop from the basketball side is actually one that you might not think off firsthand makes a lot of sense. Manhattan basketball. You may look at that and say, well, how does that make any sense? They don't draw for a tough first game, and they're playing a Quinnipiac team that just lost Umar Shannon. While that's true, that also means that you now expect them to run through to at least the championship. That's a lofty expectation against a team in Quinnipiac that they lost to twice. That's a high expectation for a team that has really struggled against the Bobcats. That second-round matchup could pose a lot of problems for them, and it could pose a threat towards them getting to the NCAAs. And their expectations have now risen because of the injury to Umar Shannon. I think it might be a little too quick. I don't know if they beat the Bobcats. Let's go to the most important Bobcat in this postseason. Let's start with you, Mike.
It's Bryce Van Braven, and I think it's obvious that when Jordan Samuels-Thomas isn't out there, this team's missing a huge piece of not only their offensive weaponry, but their leadership as well. He's one of only 5 seniors in this team. And he said it in the past segment. They win 8-0 with him. They tie 1-1 without him. It's not necessarily a thing that you need to say. Oh, the reason that they tied is because they didn't have Samuels Thomas in the lineup. But he's a huge piece, not only offensively, but he's in there physical as well. He's one of 2 big bodies on this team that they need to compete if they want to have any chance in the NCAAs. And even you can make the same argument in the ECAC against a team like Cornell or a team like Union, who does have a lot of size and is built like a traditional ECAC team. You can even make the same argument with Yale. They're a really big team as well. Speed-wise, I think this team can match up with just about anyone in the conference or even in the nation. But I think size, this is where Bryce Van Braven needs to step up. And I think he's shown this year that he's been the most consistent player the whole season. I think that's why he needs to continue to do that, and I think that's why he's going to be the most important Bobcat for the hockey team heading down the stretch.
Offense wins games, defense wins championships, and the anchor of your defense is your goalie. Chelsea Layden is the most important Bobcat in the playoffs. They already rode her through one series, in a series where we all thought it was going 3 games, and she played out of her mind well, and she's played out of her mind well since she was replaced in that Brown Senior Day game, and I mentioned that, but she needs to be the most
Props to Rick
important
Seeley, by the way, for that,
yes,
for that move.
And he knows how to do that. He knows how to light a fire under his players, and he did it with Layden, and now she's playing out of her mind again like she did at the beginning of the year. If she can stick in that, they can beat Clarkson. There is no doubt in my mind that if she plays the way she's been playing the last 2 weekends, they can beat Clarkson at Clarkson, which might get them an NCAA tournament bid, even if they do lose the ECAC.
I'll stick on the defensive side, but I'll switch back to the men and say Zach Tolkinen. And that might not seem obvious at first, but when you consider the fact that we don't know if we're going to see Danny Federico, and if we see him, we don't know how much of him we're going to see. How many minutes is he going to play? How effective he's going to be in those minutes? And then we talk about how young the defense is on the men's side. He would be the only upperclassman out on the ice if that were the case. He and Alex Barron would be the only 2 returning players from last year with everybody that they lost. And if he doesn't play well, Union, we've been talking about it. If they were to play Union, Daniel Ciampini and Daniel Carr would eat that defense alive if they didn't play well.
Especially with the inconsistencies that we've seen out of those freshmen this year. A senior-ridden offense like Union.
They all just have a tendency to pinch.
Yes.
That's the bottom line. And too much.
They're good enough, like I said, they're good enough at times to get back, but when you're playing teams that are experienced and they are, Union is one of the smartest teams too. They know what to expect from the top-end teams in the conference, and they already know right now that what players pinch on what games and what tendencies players like to make. And they know Quinnipiac probably better than any other team, maybe besides Yale, that they know what to expect. And I think that's where they're going to run into trouble if like you said, Federico is unable to play.
To go to the basketball side, it's been well documented now that this team doesn't have Umar Shan. We've spoken about it on a number of occasions. So now the most important player becomes Zahid Hurst easily, no question about it. Zahid Hurst, we've spoken over and over again what it means to this team when he scores in double figures and when he doesn't. When he scores in double figures, all the games that they've wound up winning, well, guess what? He's been in double figures. I think they're 0-5 when he is not in double figures. He's got to not only be a double-digit scorer, he's got to be 15, 16, 17 points per game in this tournament, and he's got to provide wing scoring to open up the 2 players down low, like Azatam and Usman Drame, to allow them to get one-on-one matchups in the post so that they can go and they can beat the lesser quality post players in the MAAC. Last year, final question, guys, last year we had 2 teams make the NCAA tournament on this campus. So yes or no? Well, not yes or no. Let's do it this way. Let's do how many teams are going to make the NCAA tournament. Okay, I'll start. How many teams are going to make the NCAA tournament on this campus? Personally, I think I would have said 2 prior to the Umar Shannon injury. I will now say 1. I think the Quinnipiac women's ice hockey team is going to be real close. I think if they get a win this weekend, that's going to go a long way towards possibly making them that second team. But I'm going to say 1. I'm going to say it's only the men's ice hockey team. I'm going to say that both the women's basketball team and the men's basketball team make an exit in the semis, although the men's basketball team probably has a better chance of going to the MAAC championship and winning. But for right now, Nick, I'm going to say 1 team makes the NCAAs.
I'm going to go 2.
Okay.
I'm going to go 2. Obviously, men's hockey, they've locked it. I don't think there's a way they lose out. I don't think they can find a way. I don't think they can find a way to drop 9 pairwise in a week.
They could get
Let's assume they could.
Let's assume they don't. Let's assume they don't.
So I think we get men's hockey, and I think women's hockey makes it. I think they beat Clarkson.
Certainly possible.
Brianna Lang has been playing goal for Harvard, not Emrys Mashmeyer, the Patty Kaz nominee, the only goalie as a Patty Kaz nominee. So I think Harvard ends up losing to Cornell, drops them out of the pairwise 8 spots. Quinnipiac jumps into that top 8, and they get the at-large bid if they don't win the tournament because they end up losing to Cornell in the final, if that happens.
I think for what you said about men's basketball, I would have said 3, but I think I'm going to stick with 2. I think it's the women's and the men's ice hockey teams. I think for the women's basketball side, the top 3 teams are a little bit too superior, and like we said, they've struggled against those 3 teams all year long, not being able to find a way to win. So I think for those reasons that Nick just said, I think the women's and men's ice hockey teams get in. I think for the women's, I think they're finally motivated enough. They're sick of going up to these up north country and losing to these teams in the semifinals. I think they finally got over the hump against St. Lawrence. They're going to finally get over the hump against Clarkson. They're going to finally get to that championship game. And I think if they beat Clarkson, I don't think there's a team in the ECAC that's going to be able to beat them in that final game. I think they're finally motivated. They're playing good defense. They got the goaltending finally. I think if they can just get a little bit more secondary scoring besides that top line, I think they can compete with those teams, and I think they can win. And like you said, it'd have to be some some real big screw ups
Some
for the
errors.
men's hockey not to get in right now as they're sitting 7th in the pairwise.
And I think the Quinnipiac women's defense really doesn't want to hear that ice horn at Shield Arena
That's
again.
true.
They hate it.
It's not that loud, is it?
No.
I don't think so.
But no, I agree. I would agree with 2. We know the men's hockey team's going to get in. Women's hockey, they beat Clarkson, they're going to get in. It doesn't matter what happens in the championship game. Even if they don't, they're right on the border. If Harvard does lose, they could drop out. They might not even
And you
have to
don't,
win.
you don't know how Syracuse Mercy
Exactly.
is.
There's some teams that can move around. And on the basketball side, one of those teams gets hot, we know how good they can be. And you guys were talking about it in the basketball segment, how Quinnipiac matches up pretty well with Manhattan. They've already beaten them twice.
Yep.
Looks like they may have figured out something against Canisius in the last game where they won. So you never know. They could still get hot despite not having
The
Umar
big
Shannon.
deal will be playing Iona. If they were to draw Iona without Umar Shannon, that might be tough. Women's ice hockey team, to me, is the team that if we're going for 1 or 2 on this campus, if we're talking about that discussion, women's ice hockey team and their success, Connor and Jordan, their success is going to determine whether we get 1 team or 2 teams on this campus in the NCAAs.
All right, thanks, guys. Well, that's going to do it for us here on this special playoff preview edition of Bobcat Breakdown. Connor, I guess all that's left to do is to see how the playoffs unfold.
That's right, Jordan. But before we go, we want to quickly thank all of our analysts, our executive producers, Marty Joseph and Zach Daly, and our special thanks to QBSN Chairman Kevin Noonan.
Also, don't forget to check out all our other Q30 Sports content at Q30television.com and follow Q30 Sports on Twitter at Q30 Sports and follow QBSN at QBSN.
For Jordan Siegler, I'm Connor Fortier. We'll see you next time on Bobcat Breakdown.